Wherever you are in the world today, welcome. Welcome to Preacher Dave. Today I'd like to talk to you about Jesus and say what? There was many times when Jesus, we could have asked that question of him. Say what? So today I'd like to look at a particular story where Jesus took his disciples out on a boat. It was the end of a busy day. And Jesus had been preaching to the crowds. He'd been telling them parables or stories that had meaning that they didn't necessarily understand. But later on, he would go and tell his disciples all about them. Following this, he jumped in a boat and took them out onto the sea. Let's have a look at this. We're going to find it over in Mark chapter 4. Mark chapter 4. So in the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, the second book of the New Testament, you'll find in chapter 4, and if you look up verse 35, would you read with me that? That day when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let's go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd behind, they looked and they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" He got up, rebuked the wind and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" It's interesting what Jesus does here, because at the end of this day, when he heads out onto the sea, do you think he knows what's coming? Now, Jesus said, let's go out onto the ocean because we will need to get to the other side. But he knew what was in between here and the other side. He knew that he was taking them into a storm. Now, that's interesting. Most of the time we think that storms just happen to us in life. But when we're a follower of Jesus and a follower of God, we actually are led sometimes into a storm. Not by our circumstances, but by God himself. Some people don't like this idea of who God is. But if he's truly a teacher and if he truly is God and he knows what's coming, why would I worry about being in the storm with Jesus? What's interesting here is, let's look at the verse again. It says, let's go over to the other side. Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was. They took him along just as he was. Interesting enough, the disciples thought they were taking Jesus with them. Now, a servant leader, somebody who leads from the bottom up, not from the top down, as Jesus did, they were still under the illusion they were in control of their lives. He was trying to teach them that they weren't in control of their lives, that he was. But he did it in such a way that they thought they were running their own lives, so they took him along. What if the reality was that Jesus took them along? What if the reality of our life is that we are actually taken along by Jesus through this journey? The first question is, say what? Especially when we're led into a storm by Jesus. Say what? Seriously? I was thinking of a title for this sermon, this teaching session, and I just couldn't get past the idea of how we react to who God is. So many times we just think, say what? Is that real? Well, the three things that I'd like to share with you today are, as first off, that Jesus can take us into a storm. He can also sleep through that same storm, and he can perform miracles from within the storm. Each one of those, to me, is a say what idea. So first up, he takes us into the storm. They took him along just as he was. Just as he was. Jesus doesn't change. He doesn't need to. The God of the universe who came down to this earth knew what he was doing. And he knew every part of what that was because he was constantly connected to the Father and to the Holy Spirit. The three of them were able to spend time with each other at an incredibly intimate relationship level. The three are actually one. And in that process, Jesus being down on this planet, using his humanity, he tied himself into that. And so he knew what was coming. He knew to get to the other side, they were actually going to go through a storm. And so much of life is about that. The experience of living with God in our life is we go through a storm, but we're heading to the other side. That's another sermon for another day. But what I want to know, or what I want to share with you, is that Jesus was taking them into a storm. And when you tell the story that way, you say, what? Seriously? Jesus is taking me into the eye of the storm? They took him just as he was. Interesting enough, Jesus takes us just as we are. Faulty, messed up, screwed up, somewhat leaning his way, loving other people, being loved by other people, being rejected by others, having trouble with relationships, all of the messy stuff that we have in our life. Jesus takes it just as we are. The intelligent thing was that the disciples also took Jesus as he was. What they didn't understand, though, was that the way that Jesus is always a surprise. And that's what the say what moments are. They took him as he was into the boat. There are other boats with them as well. And a furious squall came up. What kind of squall? A furious squall. Say, what? A furious one? We're not just talking about a little storm, a little bit of lightning. We're talking about fury. We're talking about a furious storm. Well, how furious was it? Well, it explains it. The waves were breaking over the boat. Now, this sea is not very big. For that to come up, and that's an awful lot of wind, for that to be blowing up that many waves, and they're actually now crashing over the side of the boat. And so how bad was that situation? Because that's another say, what? Well, it says, so that it was nearly swamped. So it's nearly swamped? Say what? It was going to sink. If this kept up, this boat was not going to survive. Now, what were the disciples doing during this storm? Well, I can imagine that they were probably grabbing their buckets. And they were grabbing their buckets and they were pouring out as quickly as they could the water that was coming over the side. And that's what we would do in a storm. We would actually start doing something. We'd be grabbing a bucket, trying to get rid of the problem, or get rid of what we think is a problem, and that is the effect of the problem. See, the problem was not the water coming into the boat. The problem was that they were in a furious storm. That was the real problem. The effect of the storm was that water was coming into their boat, and then their belief was, if that keeps up, they're going to drown. They're going to perish. That's the belief that Jesus needs to unravel with us, is that he needs to show us that we will not perish. We will not perish when we have Jesus with us. We usually think that Jesus is the one that's coming along with us, whereas Jesus knew that the disciples were coming along with him. He was leading them into the storm. So where was he going to go with this? The furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat. What was the immediate problem with that? Well, it says it was nearly swamped. Say what? It was nearly swamped. What does that mean? They're going to actually drown out in the middle of the ocean. It's an awful long way to shore, too far to swim. And where was Jesus? Well, he was in the stern. Where's the safest place in the boat? Well, it's in the stern. And what was he doing there? Well, he was asleep. Say what? And there was probably only one cushion in that whole boat. And he had that cushion that he was sleeping on. So you're comfortable there, Jesus, are you? Say what? He was comfortable while they were in their panic. The disciples said, we need to deal with this say what situation. So the disciples went and they woke him up. Jesus, say what? You're sleeping. And they said to him, Teacher, don't you care about us? The first thing is that they recognise is that he was their teacher. So there's a teaching moment coming. That's what's nice about this story. There is a teaching moment coming. At least they understood that he was their teacher. But they then made the accusation, which is, say what? Don't you care about us? You don't seem to be caring about us. The next say what moment is, if you do nothing, we're going to drown. Say what? You don't care about us enough to watch us drown? Matter of fact, you're probably not even watching us drown. You're sleeping while we drown. You'll be okay. You're probably God, right? But what about us? Jesus is always caring. He's always taking care of us. But the nice thing is that when we go and call out to him, because we see this come up, in verse 39, he says he got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves. The lovely thing is that whenever we call out to Jesus, he gets up. And then he does something. Usually it's not so much doing as saying, because the words of Jesus are so powerful that when he says something, something happens. And he said to the waves, quiet, be still. I wonder if he was actually talking to the disciples or to the waves. Quiet, be still. Yes, we recorded that he said this to the waves. But who is he really talking to? Who does Jesus really talk to when he says, quiet, be still? Isn't he speaking to our soul and our spirit, saying, just be quiet, be still? Now, at the same time, I'll calm the storm. Because Jesus' words are powerful, but the most powerful part of that is that Jesus' disciples then became calm. Because what happened? The wind died down and it was completely calm. How calm was it? It was completely calm. You get out in a lake sometime and it's completely calm, it just turns to glass. Absolutely turns to glass. And then you see that mirror reflection of what's on the horizon, you know, on the other side of the lake, and then you see the same thing in that mirror reflection. What a fabulous photograph that becomes is when we see that. When we see the reflection of Jesus and what Jesus has made, what God has made, is incredibly calming to our soul. Jesus didn't miss the teaching opportunity here, because in verse 40 he said to his disciples, why are you so afraid? Say what? You know what just happened, right, Jesus? There's good reason for us being afraid. But then he says this, do you still have no faith? Do you and I still have no faith because of the storm? The longer that I have lived, the more experiences I've been through, the more storms that I have been through, the more calling out that I have done to Jesus, the more times that he has actually calmed my soul and my spirit. And things around me became completely calm. The more of those that have happened in my life, the more my faith builds. But it's almost like the longer between the storms that happen in my life, then the more I forget that the calm is normal. The calm is not normal on this planet. The nice thing is that Jesus got the calm coming at the end of this planet. In the meantime, he cares about you and me, but in the big picture, he cares about the whole world and the whole universe. And he's got that with his calm plan in mind. I'd just like to leave you today with a couple of thoughts. And that is that we get very challenged during the storm. We want to say what? When we see Jesus or God not do anything, we want to cry out and say what? And then we have to actually go and wake God up. And we cry out to him and say, don't you actually care about me? We're actually saying to God, say what? Maybe we can change that question just a little bit. Maybe we can change our response to that just a little bit. If you've never trusted Jesus with that, if you've never experienced what it's like to have Jesus do that for you, and you'd like to give him that opportunity, would you just pray this prayer with me? Jesus, I've been trying to ride this storm out by myself. You've got an incredible way to perform miracles, but I just don't know what they are. I've never trusted you with that before. I've never let you really handle that. I've tried to do it myself. I've tried to bail out that boat myself. And at times it just seems like you don't exist, but I sense today that you're trying to talk to me. You're trying to calm my spirit. I want to give you that opportunity, God, and give over my own efforts, my own sinfulness, my own trying to get myself through this life by myself. I just want to let you be the one that handles that. I want you to lead me. I want you to be my God. Amen. And if that's the first time you've ever done that, prayed that prayer, I ask that you'd find a good fellowship or a church somewhere that you can attend and find your experience with God of how he wants to lead us down that path again and again. And if you're just encouraged by the story that Jesus is always there, even when he seems to be asleep, he's taking care of the problem. And he's got the resolution coming. He's got the calm coming. And you just need to remind you of that today. Whatever the storm is in your life, I pray that you'll be encouraged by that today. And I look forward to catching up with you again next week. God bless you. And may you be kind to yourself as he is to us.